1 year ago, the mysterious death of Micah Francis Miller raised quiet questions, and then louder ones. Chris Skinner, a decorated Army National Guardsman, motivational speaker, and beloved father of three, was found at the bottom of a neighborhood swimming pool on Labor Day of 2021. He was paralyzed from the chest down. Authorities quickly ruled his death an accident, but in the months that followed, that explanation unraveled, thanks in large part to one woman's persistence, his sister, Tamra McDermott. Since Tamra first spoke publicly, new evidence, new witnesses, and newly uncovered relationships have cast serious doubts on the official narrative surrounding Chris's final moments. Questions about care, access, motive, and even control over his wheelchair remain unanswered. But what's no longer in question is this: Chris's life and death demand a deeper look. Today, Tamra joins me and FITSNEWS correspondent Holly Lyons to discuss what she's learned, what she's endured, and why she refuses to stay silent, even when speaking out has come at great personal cost. This is her final public interview and her most revealing. So, Tamara and Callie, thank you so much for joining us today to have this important conversation about your brother, Chris Skinner, and everything that you've learned over the past, really, it's been since his death, but over the past 8 months, I think things have kind of come into a much clearer focus for you.
Yes, most definitely. And I want to thank the both of you and FITSNEWS for allowing me to have my final event on your platform. I will say that speaking out and having the media approach me has been a newfound thing for me. And I just want both of you to know that I find FITSNEWS to have a lot of integrity. And that's why I've chosen to come on your platform, because I feel like I can trust you guys, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. We try. So, I think we don't want to get too far into the weeds, but Chris was your brother, and he, we didn't know him in life, but in what we've gotten to learn about him, he was special. He was just a resilient person who, took the worst part of his life and turned it into something inspirational, which that's what's always impressed me more. But to you, he was a brother.
Yeah.
I have a really close relationship with my brother. And I know if anything happened to him, like you said, I would want answers. You just want to know the truth about how he died. So I commend you for that. I commend you for pursuing that, because in this story, in this case, it's not easy. There are always hurdles thrown at you in anything tied to Micah Miller.
Right. Yes.
And we'll get into some of those hurdles.
Yes. I think I am fortunate because obviously I am his sister, right? And that means at the time of his passing, he was, I had known him approximately 39 years, because I am the baby child in the family. So I had two older brothers. And so 39 years I've known him. So I've known his whole journey, right? So I've known before paralysis, after paralysis. And so you nailed it when you said that he is a very special person. He is the most resilient person I've ever known in my life. After his paralysis, he took it with a champ, and as a champ. And I just don't know if I could have, I don't know if I would have done it as well as he did, but he sure did take it. And later, when we get to listening to my mother speak on audio, one thing she says that I want to say right from the get-go is that he was magnetic. So anybody that met him, as soon as you get to have conversations with him, you forget that he's in a wheelchair, because he was just that magnetizing. And so I'm really just glad that I got to actually show the world who he really is and what he accomplished. And that was kind of the goal. So,
Yeah, I always think of, there's those people that when they're in a room, they become the room. And that's always kind of been how I imagine Chris was. Just like brings light and sunshine into a situation.
yeah, he never met a stranger, that's for sure. No matter where he went, I knew somebody. And it was sometimes when you went out with him, it was like, oh my gosh, can we make it, from A to B without running into somebody that he knew? But no, we could not. So that's just who he was. So,
So his death, I think that's a good place for us to start. His death, the day of his death. I just it's so sad. And can you just talk a little bit about that day, how you found out, and your initial thoughts?
yeah, sure. So, that day actually was Labor Day. So it was September 6th, 2021. I planned to cook out with him ahead of time. And I even coordinated, food items with his spouse. And so I was looking forward to seeing my brother. I actually hadn't seen him in about, I want to say it was at least 4 weeks or more, because I was in my studies to become a counselor at that time. And I was right on the cuff of, accomplishing that. And so I planned that on purpose so I could go and, see him and interact. So that day I was prepared with all the food and everything, and I got the phone call. And I got the phone call that I was told by a neighbor, actually. A neighbor contacted me and said, I'm been told to call you to let you know that your brother has passed away. My first reaction was anger, because I was like, what? Like, selfishly, I was like, wow, this is supposed to be like the day I go over. Like, I didn't know how to handle it. But then what really caused the anger was the person said he was found in the bottom of the community pool. So my first reaction was, and I feel whoever this person that called me is, I apologize, because my first reaction was, who let him in the pool? Like in the area, in the pool area. So that was my first instinct. And that poor person on the phone, it was a female. She said, like, I don't know the answer. Like, I don't know. And I was like, I'm sorry. And so that was my kind of my first reaction. Then I got there to the house, because I just dropped everything and I just went straight to the house. And I was able to, my dad lived inside the house. So I was able to go talk to him. And then I rounded up his wife and kids, and we went to the hospital to go try to, see him. So that's kind of my events that day.
So beyond the anger, did anything that day strike you, like, just was it unsettling? Was there anything that just felt off to you about what you were being told, what was happening?
Yes, I did feel there was something off. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. But again, you guys gotta understand, it was a shock to the system.
Right.
I will say that that day, somebody from Solid Rock Church, who was a supposed leader at that time, showed up at the house, was kind of there all day after Chris passed, which was strange to my family and I, because it kind of felt like we were being encroached, like, in our private family time. And that was odd to us.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, we recently, Callie, go ahead. You go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just wondering what you make of the time lapse there, because there was some time before you were notified. It really wasn't immediate.
Yes. So I guess we'll touch on that. I will say that we were not notified until probably, I want to say, like, at least 2.5 to maybe 3 hours after he had been removed from the pool and I guess at the hospital. Um, that was confusing. And I will say that when I got the police footage I went in December 2024 and went and got the footage that now is released everywhere. And I, I giggle when I'm nervous, but to be honest, it's been very hard to see it circulated. However, I do understand uh, that it's helped everybody confirm with their own eyes what I've been trying to say. But that day was, I guess the reason why I brought this up is that I did not know, and my family did not know, that the pastor of Solid Rock even was on the scene that whole day. We never had any interactions with him. So that was strange to see that. I hope that answered your question.
It was
it
strange
did,
to
yeah.
see that on our end too. It was just, yeah. And I mean, we had before, because we've had that video for quite some time and just held back on releasing it out of respect for your family. But in watching it, we had the same reaction. We were like, this is very bizarre. Before releasing it, we did chat with you about your feelings on it. And you said, I mean, to you, having the truth out there is more important than anything.
Yeah.
So that
Well,
did factor into our decision.
Yeah, and national news, got it, right? They got it. They took wind of it. And when guys know this, when national news takes over, it's like game over because they'll release anything. And so, yes, at that point, it was kind of like, well, it's out there. So
his death initially, after what little investigation I could see was done, was classified as an accident. Did you accept that initially? What were your feelings on that?
it's a really good question. I will say internally, no, I've never accepted that answer internally. I can say it's been a topic behind the scenes in my family, which would be me and my parents. And my parents, let me clarify this. I have a mother and a stepfather, and then I have a biological father. So all of us, there's always been a conversation behind the scenes. But out of respect for somebody that we have known for a long time, we just accepted the answer we received because the value of that relationship meant more to us at that time.
Right.
That's what we did.
Right. So, and part of the questions are kind of what we've learned since then. And so I'm going to kind of just get into the elephant in the room we have to call it alleged relationship affair that was occurring between Susie Skinner, Chris's wife, and John Paul Miller. To you, I don't think alleged is the right word to use, but and that was according to the affidavit of John Paul's ex-wife, Allison Williams, that was filed in court in early June of 2024. That was kind of coming to a head right before Chris's death.
Yeah, so one thing I'll say about this is that I don't know Miss Williams. And that was a shock to read the affidavit. Now, I'm going to say this about her. I don't know her. And I will say, I don't feel that anybody would make something up like that and put it in an affidavit for fun and sake. So I'm going to give her credit, right, for being honest in a court document. So that's how I feel about that. My family and I learned as in me and my parents, let me clarify again, we learned with the world, what the world is learning. So all these pieces that are coming out, it's been eye-opening.
Yeah, I think, okay, so we did our first story on Micah Miller's death May 2nd. And between May 2nd and when Allison Williams filed her affidavit, I had at least 2 people tell me that I needed to look at Chris Skinner's death closely. 2 people, former church members, close friends of Micah's. And when I saw that affidavit, my jaw dropped because it was already on my radar, but that's when it really went on my radar. It was, 2 spouses who their deaths didn't appear to be what they were trying to be sold as. So that is when I think Callie and I were both. I mean, Callie, this has been kind of a story that's really been close to her heart. Mine too, but I think Callie's she's been relentless in pursuing this, and we both said we've got to get answers in this, and that's when we started asking questions. But since all of that started coming out, I think you've learned more about Chris's life in the weeks and months leading up to his death that are things that are concerning.
Yeah, I'll have to say that I kept seeing all over the internet for 8 months that I stayed silent. Where's Chris's family? Where's Chris's family? And I will say, when I made the decision to actually speak out for the first time, I was flooded with information and people that wanted to tell me stuff, which I'm grateful for. On this topic, I think, you guys have seen there's another witness who let me know that that they also spoke to my brother directly, and he told them that he was going to be confronting the pastor. And I will say, it's a very credible source. It's a source that I have known for a very long time. And it's been in our family circle for a very long time. And there was evidential stuff around that to show that they did have a conversation. And so we have not just Allison Williams, who I don't know. I have somebody that I've known for a very long time who's also said, oh, yes, I had a conversation with your brother and he was upset. So.
And I just want to point out to people that are watching this that there has been a lot of movement behind the scenes to try to discredit you. Anything that we talk about in this video, Callie and I have both heard or seen. These are not. You have the proof, Tamra. I just want to make sure people know that right now, because of all of the harassment of witnesses about the ongoing investigation, we're not going to play these recordings. We're not going to talk about who these people are directly, but we have seen everything. Everything that Tamra is talking about in this video exists and has been forwarded to authorities. So I just want to get that out there.
Thank you for saying that, because I have said all along when I started speaking out that I didn't take the task of speaking out lightly. And what people don't know is I actually spoke with legal counsel before I ever did, to make sure that I knew what to say, not to say. And I had to make sure I had facts. And what I've always said, and is true, is for the last 6, maybe even longer than that, I have kept a lot of proof, a lot of audio. And I want to make this clear. I didn't do it to harm anybody. I did it because I knew there was a risk of me being harmed. I want to make sure I have backup to say, okay, what I have said is what I've been told or what I have seen. And that's why I did it. So.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, because in the almost 1 year we've been covering the story, I know what's going to what the narrative that will try to be spun. I just want to make sure people know we have what we have supports everything that you're saying. So one day I think people are going to hear it all. I think one day it's going to all come out, but that is there. And it wasn't just one individual that you spoke to. We have heard from multiple witnesses who say a lot of really interesting things about what was going on in Chris's life leading up to his death. And, I think that one of the things that bothered me the most was he wasn't getting the care that he needed. I mean, he relied on his family, specifically, his spouse, for a lot of, bathing, a lot of those like daily tasks that you can't do when you're paralyzed. And a lot of these witnesses are saying that he was not getting that care.
There was definitely a shift. There was definitely a change. Now, I always, just so you guys know, I always like to give a fair analysis and give credit where credit's due. So there were many, many positive years in Chris's life, and there was many beautiful family life memories. And I will say this about Susie Skinner. I always admired her and her strength for marrying a quadriplegic who happened to be my brother, raising children, having this beautiful life. I got to experience that, right? But the last year of his life, there was a huge change and shift. And that was very apparent to everybody. And so I think what you're referring to in the witness statements is that there has been a shift. And Chris, anybody who knew Chris would know that he was never shy to say how he felt. Okay. If Chris felt somewhere, people will know it, because he was kind of like me. I just, we just say how we feel. And so he was not shy with telling others. And so I think that's what happened. He would tell others how he was feeling, and these were these witnesses. So
he wore his heart on his sleeve.
Yeah. He did.
And your parents, also in preparation for this, provided statements kind of that aligned with what these witnesses said.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're hard to hear. I mean, and we can play them at any point. Whenever you think they're relevant, just let me know. But yeah, I mean, and everything that we have looked at, everything we have seen, there's definitely a shift in the last year. I've got a lot of dates in my head. When did Chris and Susie start going to Solid Rock?
Well, it's really interesting because I read somewhere and I want to say I read in Spotlight on Susie, which was in Solid Rock, that it said 2018.
Yeah, we'll put, yeah.
Okay. And
Okay.
then I read, and then there was another thing I saw that said 2019. So I would say 2018 or 19, because I don't remember 100%, but that's what I've read from her statements. So
Okay. So not long before things shifted, which, I mean, just pointing that out there.
Yeah.
I'm not just not implying anything, just putting that out there. So, and we'll put Spotlight in Susie. We'll put a little photo up so people can see that, because that was done shortly after Chris's death, and kind of goes into a lot of history about Susie.
Mm-hmm.
Of everything that you were told by witnesses, beyond Chris's mental health state, and kind of a alleged decline in the care that he was receiving, were there other things that you were told that were alarming?
Well, I think that would this be a good time to read some of these statements?
Yeah, I think we can.
Let's do that. How about you guys, if you don't mind?
Not at all.
Would you like me to do that?
So I'm going to start with what?
Oh, I'm sorry. We must have a delay.
All right. So I'm going to.
Yeah, you go right ahead.
Okay. So I'm going to start with one witness, and this is a quote. As they were talking to you, this is what they said. So my main points were that Chris was not the same for probably 6 months to a year before that. I also told him that Chris had told me a couple more times than once that Susie, that he was struggling because he's losing hope. And Susie was really pushing him to like accept the fact that he'll never walk again. I look at that in hindsight, like, why the bleep would you do that? You know, I said that multiple times, felt like a burden, wasn't cared for. This is when you asked that person if they had told that to investigators. They said, I said that multiple times. He felt like a burden, wasn't being cared for, felt like she wasn't, that she wasn't going to be able to do it forever. She wasn't into it and wasn't getting paid and stuff. And I told him, like, because I've stayed with Chris before, I've slept at their house before, I saw their daily routine, and it's a lot, And I'm like, Chris's entire life was built on her caring for him. The signs were there. He was depressed. He was losing his will to live. She was checked out. And I'm like, look, whether there was an affair that consummated or not, it was clear that Chris wasn't going to that church anymore. There had been a confrontation, that all these other things have happened. And I'm like, yeah, it's clear. I just want to see the truth come to light, and I want to see justice for him.
It's hard to hear those things, it's hard to hear how sad Chris was,
Right. Okay. It's sad. It is really sad. And then we had another statement. This was a written one. I mentioned to blank, because we don't want to say who they were talking to. When I talked to Chris, one of the last times, a number of months before he would pass, he told me he thought the pastor had a crush or something for Susie. I remember him being very frustrated and pretty pissed off about it. Blank mentioned that she stopped bathing him. I remember saying that as well, along with either having told him or planning to tell him to stay the hell away from his family. He was actually so mad that he felt guilty for cursing, and I remember saying that all curse words are welcome here. I don't recall ever hearing him that worked up about something. So that really aligns with what Allison had put in her affidavit.
Right. And that's the person that we've known for a very, very long time, and I would call a credible source. And that person actually had text message proof of my brother after the conversation, writing that person saying, thank you so much for talking to me about this, and and thanking that person for their time to listen.
He was so loved. I think, I read these and I think of this, a lot of people are missing him, and a lot of people want answers. Here's another witness. I remember talking to him about all the physical pain, the mental pain, the depression, and the burden on family, on Susie. She's burned out. Let's see. You know what? I need to put my glasses on. This is what's happening here. This is 46 is what this is. So telling me that he's thinking she can't take it anymore, and him saying he can't take it anymore. And I'm saying, Chris, you're one of the strongest people I know. You can take a lot more, and your kids know it. Think about your kids during the tough times. Always trying to get his attentions back on the kids.
Yeah.
Chris loved his kids.
Oh, yeah. He was the best daddy ever. He really was. He was. And I'm not just saying that because I'm his sister and biased. I mean that. Like, he was an admirable father figure.
There's just some people I think are just built for that role. And he just, I think he was one of those people. He was built to be a father.
Yes.
All right. So this statement, this is one that sent the hair on the back of my neck standing up, and we're not going to get to who, like, their relationship to the situation, but they were close to them at the time of Chris's passing, close to Chris, close to Susie, and had witnessed the budding relationship with John Paul. So, all right, I remind people, this is quote, I have the audio. We're not playing it because we want to protect these people. Throughout the time that I knew Chris and Susie, Chris would often visit my home. During these visits, Chris confided in me that he was struggling in his marriage. It was clear that Chris was emotionally vulnerable, yet he remained committed to his marriage and his role as a husband. While Chris was still alive, Susie began to privately express her dissatisfaction with their life together. In multiple conversations, Susie told me she was burned out from caring for Chris and was exhausted emotionally and physically. She openly fantasized about leaving him and starting a new life with John Paul, JP. She said that she could not handle the burden anymore and longed for the freedom she believed that she could have with someone else. These conversations deeply concerned me, especially considering that Chris was alive, dependent on her, and seemingly unaware of the depth of her resentment. Still quoting, JP aggressively inserted himself into Chris's life during this time. He actively worked to build a friendship with Chris, even as he was pursuing a deeper relationship with Susie behind the scenes. Every time we would go out, JP would somehow appear. It was not an occasional coincidence. It became a pattern that felt deliberate. JP was not merely present. His persistent involvement felt invasive and wrong. One day, remind people, this is a quote. One day, JP suggested it would be beneficial if they could remotely control Chris's wheelchair. Although the comment may have been framed as a joke, it deeply unsettled me. The idea struck me as dangerous and inappropriate, and it left a lasting impression that something was not right. I personally witnessed JP assisting Chris with his wheelchair on multiple occasions. He would offer to adjust it, maneuver it, or help Chris when he was stuck. At the time, it appeared helpful on the surface. However, considering JP's earlier disturbing comment and his growing influence in Susie's life, I later questioned whether this close access to Chris's wheelchair could have been misused. While I have no direct proof that JP tampered with the wheelchair, the context and the eventual outcome of the events made me view his involvement as highly suspicious. In the weeks leading up to Chris's death, Chris continued trying to navigate his marriage, unaware of the full extent of Susie's relationship with JP. He fought to hold his family together even as Susie was already emotionally detaching herself and entertaining thoughts of a future without him. Out of deep concern, I advised Chris that it would be best if he stayed away from JP, given everything I had observed and the strong feelings of unease that JP's behavior provoked.
That's a lot right there.
Yeah, that one was really hard. That one was really hard because I will say that person came forward because I chose to speak out. And when that person came to me, they said, my conscience is really guilty. Like, they actually said they had a guilty conscience. They felt like they needed to talk to me and tell me stuff. And on top of that, I'll just say this person also had lots of text messages to show conversations that were having between that person and not Chris, somebody else.
So at some point, the coroner reopened the investigation into Chris's death. Was that at your prompting, or did they do that independently and notify you?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that, because I keep seeing a small group of, I call them internet trolls. But and forgive me for saying that, but it's the truth. And
Yeah.
I've heard a bunch of them say, Skinner's sister. It is, look, this is not, if I could go back in time, I would still have my brother here today. I wouldn't be having these conversations. And so the answer to the question is this: coroner and I had a conversation, and I know that you guys have had the privilege of hearing some facts on this.
Right.
And she went to the police chief, which I believe her name is Amy. I'm not sure the last name. Maybe you guys know her last name. And she said, I've already scheduled a meeting with her. I'm already going to be talking about this with her. And she says it's because she's gotten a lot of, she called it like social media people calling her, and I guess news sources calling her on a regular basis. And so that's what she said. And you guys, I think, have heard that, correct?
Mm-hmm. We have.
And, there's another thing, I've said on some of my events that, that we were told that at the scene, that day that Susie had told the police that, no family lived in town and nobody else could say anything different than what was being said. And obviously you guys have heard that was said, that it was not a true statement, and that they were aware of that. The coroner's office and the police were aware that that was not a correct statement. And I think, if I could just expand a little bit on that, I think it actually shocked, and this is just my opinion, I think it actually shocked the coroner that anybody lived in town. Like, I think, and if y'all could have been a fly on the wall when that conversation happened, it was like, what? You live in town? Your dad, your mom lives in town, and your father lived inside the home with her? Like, it was like a shock to the system. And so that's kind of what I can share about that.
And there were, it's not just that, there were discrepancies in the report and the facts. There was, I think, I'm trying to phrase this right, because I think in my heart, she was doing her job. I think, she was following the guidance of police. But there were a lot of things in that report that did not make sense.
Yeah. So when you look at all the police reports, which I know there's been lots of, they've been circulated, right? So when you look at the police reports, you can see that everybody wrote something slightly different. But with the coroner's report specifically, if you pay attention to the report, there's, at the top, there's little things that say, did you speak to witnesses? And it says no. And it says, did you look at video, audio? And it says no. And then at the bottom in her paragraph, it said that detective, I want to say, I call it SUAD, but it's like SOUEED is the name. It said, I spoke to this person. They said they reviewed the cameras, and basically, from my understanding, that's how the determination was made. It was kind of like a telephone game. It was made by somebody telling the coroner that it was accidental. And so, and then last but not least, I will say that when we were brought in for interviews in January 2025, there was acknowledgement there that the video had not been seen yet by the coroner. So that, I know that was something that she planned to do. So,
and that's, that video to me says a lot. That video, every time I watch that, I'm trying to think how they phrased it on the report. It was like it got too close to the pool and slipped in or something.
Yeah. You could clearly see that didn't happen.
Yeah. I was like, wait, A and B, that like these two things are not the same. This is, what you've put in your narrative do not match the video evidence of the actual incident. Oh,
Kelly, what did you think about it?
This was no accident. This was no accident. And I know that's the statement that has been made repeatedly, although it varies from time to time. It shifts a bit in the details. But this is no accident. In the video, you see he lines up and he stops for a moment, and then he goes quickly forward. And I think that leaves the question, who's in control of the wheelchair? Did Chris do that? We know
Yeah.
this chair could be remotely controlled. That leaves open all kinds of possibilities, especially when you have someone who showed a fascination for a remote kind of situation. But it was no accident.
Yes, I think you guys are kind of saying what I've been saying on my events. And as you mentioned, Jen, I feel like retaliated against and cyber bullied for trying to say that, just try to be honest. And that's what I saw, and that's what it looks like. It doesn't look like an accident to me.
And why retaliate because you say something different about your brother's passing? Where's the need for retaliation there? To me, that's a whole nother layer of suspicion, quite frankly. But also, and I've told you this, I'm in a wheelchair. It's a new thing for me. When I watch that video, it does not look to me like the way someone maneuvers a wheelchair, the way a seasoned user maneuvers a wheelchair. That maybe that's just craziness in my head, but we know it wasn't an accident, so there are really only two possibilities after that. And this is probably why it's so personal to me. I realize the limitations you face when you have to count on other people for basic things that people take for granted all the time. And it's never made sense to me. It's just never made sense to me.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Attorney Regina Ward said the other day on an event I did with her, she said something that I didn't even think about. And she said, okay, well, if it was ruled an accident, then why was the wheelchair not kept and looked at to see if there was a malfunction or something within the wheelchair? And it was released the same day back to, I think, Chris's spouse. Or it said it was to a friend that took it to the spouse. So I thought that's a very valid point, right?
Right. It's yeah, 100% is. And I hate to encourage litigation ever because I think there's far too much of it. But in that situation, if you're saying that was an accident, I would certainly be contacting an attorney to perhaps take a look at it. I'm just saying. It's a really good point.
Definitely.
Certainly is.
Yeah, no, but let's not encourage any more litigation tied to this case.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. They give you the wheelchair back so quickly.
Well,
for a number of reasons. Right. It should have been investigated more thoroughly because they really didn't know what happened. But the fact that it was given back immediately and then immediately donated, so it was put into use. So anything that wheelchair could have done to tell us if there was a malfunction, anything that could have been studied about that wheelchair has now been overwritten almost immediately. So the evidence is gone.
Right. Yeah. I have to agree with you, ladies. It's been a very eye-opening journey. But I do want to touch, when you guys are ready, I want to touch on the retaliation that I received.
I would love to talk about that because I think it's such a sad but fascinating part of everything connected to this story. Everything.
Yeah.
It is. It's a social media. It's like social media warfare. It is absolutely bizarre. And I think Chris's death is a very touchy subject for some individuals with opinions on this case or personal connections to this case. And when you started speaking out, it became very that became very apparent.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And it wasn't just I mean, we're going to touch on an article that was made uh purposely in order to try to, in my opinion, bully me, retaliate against me, um defame me and my character. But I will say, in conjunction with that, I noticed there's a lot of little fake pages on Facebook everywhere where they also are doing the same thing, hiding behind these, little fake profiles. And so it's real. The web is real. One thing I will tell you gals, is that I actually talked and consulted more than once with a defamation attorney on this matter. And did you guys know, I learned a lot of new stuff. Did you know that if you file a civil suit against someone, you can actually also go to Facebook, to the Meta, and you can ask them to reveal these cyberbullies that are behind the screen in conjunction with your civil suit. Uh, and so I learned that. And so, I would just be cautious if I was these guys, because they're not untouchable if somebody files a civil suit.
Right.
So, yeah. And so let's talk about this article for a second. So we know who, okay, so the person that made statements in the article is who? The man himself,
the
Mr. Miller.
man of the hour, John Paul Miller.
Yeah.
And we don't want to bring any additional attention to this article because it was disturbing. But yeah, JP is the main source of information for that article.
Right. And he was in conjunction with another gentleman who I have learned, and I know you guys have learned, that he is pled guilty of what was it, Jen? He pled guilty.
It was related to COVID loan frauds.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he pled guilty in federal court.
Right. And so I know he's on 5-year probation. I know you have his paperwork, and I know I have his paperwork. And we didn't get it from each other. It was obtained in different ways. So anyway, so they worked together to disparage me, to defame me. And I want to touch on this for a second. Number one, I just want everybody to know that I have only met Mr. Miller one time. And that was at my brother's funeral, that he officiated by the request of my sister-in-law, Susie Skinner. So that's just it. Never met him again. It was one time. I will tell you, at the funeral, he barely spoke to me and my family. It was just a brief interaction. And I'm not going to go too much into depth about the funeral, but it was not a good experience for, my family. So that's just number one. He does not know me. Only had one interaction with me. But, he felt very inclined to say a lot of things about what he believes he knows about my life, about my relationship with my brother, and even threw out a threat on my licensure. So for everybody watching, I am a licensed counselor. But I want to tell you, I've actually also, just so you know, consulted with an LLR attorney. So it's a South Carolina license and regulation attorney.
Labor license and regulation
attorney. There you go. And I said, is my personal advocacy for my brother and me speaking out in order to ask questions about my brother and tell my truth, is that tied to my professional ethics and etc.? And they said, no. And in this article, Mr. Miller likes to throw out the ACA Code of Ethics, which is ACA Code of Ethics shall educate everybody. That's what us counselors, kind of go off of for our, our client care. So again, it's about counselor-client interaction and our professional ethics when we take in a client. I have not taken in any client when I have spoke out to the public on my brother's behalf. So I am not obligated to that. And, but anyways, that was put in the article in order to kind of put a little subtle threat, according to the attorney I spoke to. But I will say I'm going to go through this a little bit step by step, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
Okay, I've got it pulled up. So a couple things I've noticed. He made a statement and said that, I've been waiting my whole life to be a victim. I want to make this clear. I don't feel like I'm a victim. I mean, I feel like now I'm a victim of cyberbullying and harassment and retaliation. But when I started this, I don't feel like I'm a victim. I feel like my brother is the victim. And that's why I'm standing up for him, right? Because I'm his sister, and that's what he would do for me, and I'm doing that for him.
You've waited your whole life to be a victim. Says, like, that is, okay. Personal opinion, that is a weird thing to say. Nobody waits their whole life for that.
Yeah. But that was interesting. But when I talked to the defamation attorney, I want to have a statement here, and I want to read this because I think, it's important everybody knows this, because if you're doing anything online or you're writing anything in any article, I think it's very important that the viewers know. So let me pull this statement up. So I think this is what the attorney said on what he did. Just the fact that he said I'm unstable, and then he said something about my professional career, that is defamation. Okay. That is caused harm, because what am I? I'm a counselor, and I am a mental health counselor who, by the way, I'm licensed to diagnose others, just so you know.
Just throwing that out there.
I just wanted to throw that out.
Not that I would, diagnose anybody in this situation, but I could.
Right. And so anyways, this is what the attorney's quote is. Mr. Miller has fallen into defamation, specifically libel. He's specifically fallen into defamation per se category. If you say someone's unstable and also make acknowledgement of their professional licensure, you are suggesting that someone's unfit for their profession, which is what he has done, and that's defamation per se. The powerful thing about defamation per se is that the general damages are presumed, which are shame, humiliation, retaliation, attempts to bully. The judge awards damages for those things because it's already presumed, because of the intent was to cause harm. So I just want you to know that technically I have legal grounds to file a civil suit against him. And I've definitely considered, and I'm not going to lie, I've definitely considered. I would just say that Mr. Miller has a lot other bigger fish to fry than this gal, in my opinion. And I would just encourage to leave me alone. That's my encouragement, to leave me alone, because there's other bigger fish that are coming. And so I could go forward, but it would take a long time, because it takes a long time when you do a civil suit. And I have to weigh in my heart, do I want to be tied to somebody who I've only met one time? And according to this article, by the way, I see what flows from the heart, and my opinion is meanness, cruelty. I don't see anything that represents, in my opinion, anything that is Christ-like and kind coming from that heart, based on this article. And so therefore I have to ask myself, do I really want to be tied to this person for a long, long time to fight a battle? Because I really feel like as you guys know, I'm a Christian. I think people know that, my viewers know that. And I believe that God is going to bring justice eventually. And sometimes we just have to be still. And so I'm weighing that. I know people are not going to like this, that people are going to say, I want you to go forward and get justice. But sometimes I feel like there's a bigger plan. God has a bigger plan, and I have to kind of let that simmer. Now, it doesn't mean I'm going to allow continued abuse of like cyberbullying and stuff. Okay. So I just want to make that known. And I hope that wasn't too much to say, but I wanted to say all that.
No, I think that's a fascinating discussion to have and look at. I mean, it's a good message for anybody in the broader context of this story. I would
Right.
say if you do the right things for the right reasons, don't worry about it. Just that's all that you need to focus on is do the right things for the right reasons and look at the actions of others and ask yourself, are they doing
Right.
the right things for the right reasons? I mean, to me, somebody questioning the death of their family member, why would you have a problem with that?
That's a good
If
question.
yeah, I just
Nobody has ever said to me when I ask questions about my other brother, because people don't realize, a lot of people don't realize I've lost both of my brothers. Okay. So I'm the only child that my parents have left. And I do want to say this now that you brought this up. I think there's a lack of empathy on their behalf, the other side's behalf, for the fact that my parents have lost two sons and they're allowed to ask questions and I'm allowed to ask questions. And sometimes I just feel like the focus is all kind of self-centered focus and it's not looking at other people with kindness and understanding to know they have the right to ask questions about their loved one. And so, I want to say something about on that. So it was very hard for my parents to see this. It's not okay. And on top of that, he Mr. Miller put it in his statement. He said that now that Chris can't speak for himself, Tammy's other brother unalived himself. And I want you to know that is an incorrect, false statement. It's not on the death certificate. And I want to point that out because what people need to know is my parents have suffered enough. They've lost two children and they don't need any more lies or muddled, stuff out there. They've already experienced a year of listening to everybody speculate about Chris all over everywhere. And so I think that was not kind at all to make up stuff. And so I want to, if that's okay, I'm going to keep going. He says that I did not like that Chris was a strong, faithful man of God who was able to accomplish more as a quadriplegic than I could ever imagine. Okay, again, let's just highlight what flows from that person's heart. For me, I'm going to say this. I look at the fact that somebody calls themselves a spiritual leader or a pastor. That statement is just mean. And I don't see a pastoral spiritual leader in that statement. And number two, I loved my brother. I admired my brother. And in fact, I'm going to give you guys a tidbit. I was actually with him the first time he ever gave his life to Christ. I was with him. I'm the one that took him. I'm the one that did all his catheterizations that day. I was the one that drove him home that day, and he talked to me about it all the way home. I was a very proud sister of who he was. And so I feel, I would like to say that I don't allow this person to hurt me, but it was very hurtful. Okay. Because I really admired my brother. I love my brother and I really look up to my brother. I always have. And out of the three kids in our family, he was the most sociable, the person I'd always push through. And he was just like that person. And so he was, anyway, so that's what I'm going to say about that. He did mention in here Chris was a counselor. I just want to clarify this. Basically insinuated that he's a better counselor than me. Well, here's the thing. Chris never got licensed to be a counselor. So he was more like a pastoral counselor. I'm the licensed counselor. He's the pastoral counselor. I will say that one of the conversations I had with Chris before he passed was that I had said I was excited about becoming a counselor, and I was like, let's do a podcast together. And that was something I was looking forward to because I think it would have been really good for he and I to get together and do a podcast. And so do I think Chris was a better counselor than me? I think Chris was definitely a better spiritual leader, and I've never claimed to be a spiritual leader. I'm a faith-based woman, but I'd never claimed, and I think he's definitely he would be what I would call a pastoral spirit and somebody that I would look up to as a spiritual leader. And so let's see. Do you guys have any thoughts before I go on?
Well, if you don't mind.
Just how very odd these statements are.
They
Yeah.
are.
Go.
And spiritual leader? Okay, I just can't help it. What would Jesus do? Not this. Not this.
I have to agree with you. That's when I read this, I had to remind myself, this is a pastor talking. This is a pastor talking to me right now. I don't know. Anyways, something else I found interesting in his statement. He said, basically he tried to shame me in a spiritual manner about the fact that, I should be scared because God says, we have to take care of our widows and our orphans. And so it's kind of like a spiritual shame there, like, using that at the advantage. But what I found most interesting about that statement is he said that I was attacking Chris's spouse, and anybody who has been on my platform would know that I have given a well-rounded, always been well-rounded and kind, and always said like the full truth, which I started out in this segment telling you guys, like, I have to give credit, right? Or credit's due. So I've never been like in an attack mode ever. So you guys can expand on this too. So said in there basically that Tamra, I should know that they started dating in January 2025, and he wanted me to know that. So what do you guys know about that? I know you guys have a lot of data.
Well, there was an incident, that prior to Micah filing for divorce a couple of years ago, she learned about some things that were going on. And so I'm sure that her divorce attorney from that time has very specific knowledge just regarding dates and people that we probably shouldn't get into here. But January of this year that's a little ridiculous.
Yeah, well, you guys read some of the witness statements. And on top of that, I think you guys have a prayer board that was posted on the internet. And who was it posted by?
Chris and Susie's beautiful daughter.
Yeah. So I think that would be, interesting, I guess, I don't know if we'll ever know 100% from, the two individuals, right? I don't think we're ever going to get the truth, in my opinion. But I think that, I think the kids speak for themselves, and so I think we'll just let everybody else have their own opinions on that as well.
I agree. I mean, there have been a lot of things that say otherwise.
Right.
A lot of things.
Let's see. He said that Susie took care of Chris for 20 years with unwavering love and dedication. I just want to clarify this because this is the truth. The marriage was 17 years. And so 20 years is an inaccurate number. And again, this is my mother's report, what I'm about to tell you, but supposedly they dated for 6 months before marriage. And yes, my brother knew, my brother met her way back in his early, when he became paralyzed, and they met, but they were never romantic at that time. And then they had a couple of years in between, and then reconnected. So I just want that to be known. So I'm not discounting the years of dedication and care. I mean, it takes, like I said, it takes a special person to care for somebody and to marry someone who's a quadriplegic, right? And to want to be the caretaker and the wife. So I'm not discounting that, but that's an incorrect statement. And then it goes on to talk about it's heartbreaking for someone who never stepped up to care for her own brother to choose to now attack the one person who basically kept him healthy, loved, and saved. Well, that's also an incorrect statement. I stepped up a lot. I think you're going to hear that in my mom's statement. I also have the text message proof that I went all the time. Whenever he called, I would go. Of course, I had my own life and my own kids. And there might have been times where I had to say, like, okay, I can't today, or maybe someone else. But for the most part, if he wrote me and said, I need you, I was there. I took him to doctor's appointments. I did errands for him. I brought him food. Chris asked me if I could take care of my dad, like to take that responsibility off of her, actually. And I stepped up, and just so y'all know, I'm my dad's durable power of attorney. And so I take care of my dad. And so I just, that kind of stuff, just blows me away. The little twist of information. More than anybody, though, I want to give this credit. My mother stepped up more than any family member stepped up. And she deserves that respect. She was with him, and you'll hear it in her statement. She was with him all the time, helped him all the time. She helped them. She helped him physically. She financially, she helped them multiple times. And I'm not even going to get into all that, but she was always there to help solve problems, to do things. And so this whole narration that it's all one person instead of a family team, I want to tell you guys this. Our family's not perfect. No family's perfect. We had our ups and downs. But one thing Chris, I know, could say is that his family was always there. We were always there from the time, he was little all the way up, from his paralysis all the way up. We were there, and we showed up, and we helped. So I just think we'll just sum this whole thing up with saying this. I think it was very cruel of Mr. Miller to write all this. I think I have lost both brothers, and that is not making me a victim. That is an acknowledgement. That's a fact. I feel like I have every right to advocate for both of my brothers. I have never had anybody question me ever about my other brother. If I ask questions about my other brother, I've never had someone tell me I can't talk about my brother's death. But apparently, I have a text message from my former sister-in-law telling me that I was not supposed to talk about Chris's death. And I am allowed to talk about Chris's death. I am his sibling, and I've known him longer than who?
Than almost anybody.
Right.
Yeah.
And his wife. I've known
Right.
him longer than his wife. So I feel like it's not okay. So I know I get a little emotionally charged when it comes to this subject, but that's because I feel like it's unjust. I feel like it was not nice. So
It is unjust. Absolutely. It's your story. You have the right to ask questions. You have the right to tell your story. If somebody doesn't want to hear questions, that's just a whole nother situation. They've got something going on there. I'm terribly sorry that you and your family have had to go through this. It's hard enough to lose someone.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And you know what? I want to say this. There was also a claim in there about me as, about Chris didn't, at the end, he said Chris didn't want me around his family. And what I think was interesting is that's projection, because I have two sources that have said that's what my brother said to that person. And it's just not true. And I know that a lot of viewers have seen, if you go to a Shirt Impact YouTube channel, you will see lots of pictures. You know
what? In fact, I'm going to go ahead and throw those text messages up, hang on, give me 2 seconds.
Okay.
Text messages planning the, let's see.
And it is projection from someone who,
cut this part out.
by court order,
It's
is
100%
not allowed to
a
be
projection.
around his children.
Yeah.
All right. Text between you and Chris.
Oh yeah, so that's April 20th. He asked me to take him to a doctor's appointment, and that's a
Yep.
conversation. And I said, "Sure, I'll take you." And we're orchestrating that. We're talking about the where to go and how to get there.
All right, and we'll look at one more. May 7th.
Oh yeah, so May 7th, 2021, he's asking me, can we go to lunch, and that he would pay, and that it would be with his family. And then of course you see my response in the blue. It says, okay, my boys and I are coming. So that means I brought my 2 sons and we went. And
And then, all right, let's take a look. I mean, for somebody who he wanted to allegedly stay away from his family, here's a text planning the cookout.
with my sister-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
And I told Chris, so that means I had a conversation with Chris, which I did. And we talked about doing the cookout. And then he told me that he wasn't sure if Susie was working or not. So I reached out to her to make sure she wasn't working, and that we would coordinate, food. And that's what we did in that text.
Yeah. So any indication that you were estranged or they weren't comfortable with being around his family, clearly. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, yes. And then if you go to my YouTube page, you'll see a whole slideshow of pictures from when the kids were young all the way up.
Well, your parents haven't been visibly involved. They're supporting your advocacy of your brother. Okay. So your family, is close. You're close to your mom, your stepdad, your father. And we have heard the question, why aren't Chris's parents speaking out? And you are just kind of the voice for your family. Your parents are elderly, but they do support your advocacy for Chris.
Yeah. So one thing I'll tell you guys is that before I ever made the decision to speak out, I got together, had a family, mainly with my mom and my stepdad, and I said, this is what, we're thinking to do. And they were like, we're all about it. But we talked about the risk, because we watched for 8 months all the mudslinging and the things that were happening from the other side. And for me, it was intentional and purposeful for me to say, I will take the brunt of it. I will step out and protect you guys, because I did not want my mother, especially. Okay. My heart, you can tell I've got a close relationship with my mom. I speak to my mom every day on the phone. I did not want, she's a sweet soul. I did not want her to endure what I was going to potentially endure. But we felt as a family. And also, I'll say this, my dad, because I'm his durable battery, he was always fired up. Like, I'm ready to talk. I'm ready to talk. And I'm like, you know what? I will take it. I will rise, and I will do this. And because I'm younger, I'm their child. And I was like, and I will take the brunt. And there was a risk. My mom and I talked about it. My mom was actually very concerned for me, not just the risk of the verbal assaults that I would get, but also she was worried about my safety overall. She was like, I just want you to be safe. So she threw that out there. But anyway, so yes, I've been the advocate for my family, but it has been purposeful and intentional. But they're behind me, and they have their own opinions and their own voices. And so yes, they've made special audios for this event, as well as they've made some for my prior events. But this one also will tell a little bit more detail for the viewers.
All right, we're going to start with your dad.
I went in his room one day and was just talking to him about football. And then he turned around and said, well, why are you not going to church, Christopher? He said, I don't like the church anymore. He turned around with tears and he said, yeah, Dad. I said, the problem with the family? He said, yes. And I got to let her go. Right there. He said, I don't want you to get involved in it. Take care of it. So I went out of the room. Now, that day we were at Labor Day. We would have a cookout. My daughter Tammy was coming over, bring some stuff. He came in my room and he said, "When's Tammy coming over?" I said, "Noon." She told me lunchtime. He said, "Thank you." He started me walking. He started to go off. I said, "Chris," he back up. I said, "I love you." He said, "I love you too." That's what I think. That's exactly. I love you. That's the word. Chris was a very chosen man. He had a messed up body because of his injuries. He had a lot of brains. He had a lot of things he was doing. In spite of all that, he wanted to live until his future was 18 years old and died in high school. I believe that John Paul Miller and Susie prevented Chris from being able to see his kids live in high school and come to turn 18 years old. That's what he was just told to do.
So that's my dad. And I just want to clarify for the viewers, he's got Parkinson's disease. So it's hard, sometimes to make him out. And so I was proud of him because for the most part, it's pretty clear. It makes me sad to know that Chris asked him what time I was coming over. I had already communicated that to Chris, a couple days prior, but I think maybe I don't know the significance of that, but I thought that was interesting that he asked him that. But at the end, I don't know if anybody could make it out, but he said he feels like certain individuals prevented him from being able to make it to the kids' graduation, because that was always something he did talk about. He wanted to be around for their graduation. So,
which is interesting when you look at his mindset, just sad. Sorry that every time I listen to that made me sad when he said, "I love you."
yeah.
Okay. Let me get your mom's statement open.
She's an amazing mother of 2 sons, a wife, a sister, and a daughter. I appreciate her faithfulness in sharing Chris's story. I can tell you that throughout his entire life, he embraced living to the fullest. Becoming paralyzed slowed him down only for a short time. He may have sat in a wheelchair, but that's not what you noticed about him. He had the biggest personality and was so charismatic. When he engaged you in conversations, you forgot about the wheelchair and you only saw him. His daily life revolved around his family, especially his children. He knew his paralysis made things harder for them, so he tried to make special times extra fun. Sometimes he needed help from others, but he was the most present father of anyone I have ever known. I have always been on call anytime he or they needed my help. In Myrtle Beach, I only live about a 20-minute drive away. Over the years, though, we have helped with home repairs, yard work, house cleaning, special projects, laundry, cooking meals, chauffeuring, shopping, babysitting, and even moving them from home to home. Always, we were available. All they had to do was ask, and sometimes we went without them asking. The time we spent walking around the neighborhood and talking was my favorite. We talked about the Bible. He had a seminary degree and was very interesting to listen to. We also talked about his kids and his sports and his business or his next big idea, such as setting up a new website or a new business or a podcast. And our time always included me bringing him lunch and helping him eat it. In fact, I was in Tennessee and I found a text message where he texted me and said, "I miss you so much, Mom. When are you coming home?" And I said, I'll be there tomorrow, actually, and I'll be over for lunch and we'll do our walk just like normal. Often he would ask me to help him wash his face, his hands, and hair, or help him brush his teeth, or change his shirt. I also assisted him with medical needs. Whatever he needed, I would gladly help him with. He told me he wasn't getting a shower anymore, and he said it was too hard to manage. That broke my heart. Chris always loved showers, and he loved looking good. Dressing well was so important to him. I told him I would gladly help him shower in the daytime. After he had the same dirty, torn pants on for a week, I asked him, "What's the problem?" And he told me that they were all torn up from transferring him from bed to chair and back. I bought him new pants, and I washed them and delivered them ready to wear. I reminded him to just let me know what he needs and I can help him, or Tamra could help him. He said he knew that. In fact, Tamra had done a lot of help, quite a bit of help with him, especially the first part of 2021. I was handling my father's estate out of town, and I wasn't able to be there quite as much. No matter when, though, one of us would come and help him. All he had to do was call. I didn't know that our last time together in May through August 2021 would be our last summer together. I spent almost every weekday from 10:30 to 2:30 with him because he had to stay on the sofa for hours to heal pressure sores that kept breaking open. After school was out, the kids were home as well. I normally got him back in the wheelchair around 2:30, and at that time he and the kids would take Zoe out for a walk. But during the day, we watched the Summer Olympics and we cheered for our American teams. Despite the pressure sores, we had a good summer together. The last day I spent with him was Thursday, September the 2nd. He called me early that morning and he asked me to pick up KFC chicken for him. It was a childhood favorite. He said he was starving and he wanted me to hurry. I waited for KFC to open. I was the first to order, and I successfully arrived with his breakfast lunch, and he ate every bite. Afterwards, we walked and we talked, but he was not his normal happy self. He said he was feeling down. He said he didn't feel like he had a purpose anymore. I tried to encourage him, reminding him that his children still depended on him for guidance and love, and that perhaps could be his purpose at this time. I told him that he woke up this morning and therefore God had a purpose for him and that he just needed to find out what that was. He said he knew that, and he said he was lonely. He was aware that others were pulling away from him. He missed his family. He knew they had a busy life and that they were gone a lot, but he felt them pulling away also. I asked about his church friends. He said he didn't have a church or church friends. He told me he hadn't attended church in months. He said he didn't like the pastor, but his wife and children still attended. After his death, I found out that he did attend that church on Sunday, September the 5th, and came home very angry. Chris had a desire to live long enough to see his children graduate high school, even college, see them get married. Sadly, that didn't happen. I believe something traumatic happened that changed his whole outlook, something that he couldn't control, something he couldn't live with. His family was his whole life, and he couldn't live without them. His life was taken too soon. We will always carry our love for Chris in our hearts. I miss you so much, my son.
It's my mama's heart. She's one of a kind, that woman. I want to point something out, you guys. my mom mentioned that Chris did go to church the day before he died. That's the first, and I want you to know something. In the attack against me in the article, Mr. Miller said that he went to church the day before. And he claimed that Chris was so nice and kind to him. I want everybody to know that I specifically never brought that up to my viewers. And I always said he didn't go to, because he didn't go to church for months, and he didn't.
Right.
I specifically did not bring that up because I never wanted anybody to say that I was implying that that's what caused the next day. But since Mr. Miller brought it up in his article, and my mom has now confirmed it, I want you to know that we know that he came home, per my mom and per other people, he came home upset and angry that day. And that's just something everybody needs to know. And so thank you guys for your I can feel your empathy. And it's been, I'll be honest, I think I told you guys before the live started, I'm so emotionally spent, from all this. Oh, it is tough to hear all that. It's tough to hear. And my mom, like, her sincerity, and my dad.
She has such a pretty voice. Like, that might be weird, but like just, I can almost hear her singing you lullabies when you're a kid.
You want to know what I said to her about her audio? I'll make everybody laugh. I said, you're like the perfect AI reader, right? Because she's so like concise, and like it's so like this like it's all the same tone. And I said, man, you're like, you should read books for a living. Like
I was like, this is a pleasant, it was hard to hear, but her empathy and her emotion, and you can just tell how much she misses him. And yes, how involved she was. I mean, the Kentucky Fried Chicken thing cracked me up. Like, hurry up, I'm starving.
Yeah, he liked all that. He liked all that stuff. I will say this. This goes back to what I said earlier. There's a lack of empathy for the loss, not from the viewers, not from you, but from the parties, the other side. Lack of empathy for the loss. I don't think anybody has considered. There's all this throw in blame game stuff. Nobody's considered the fact that us as family members have sat for an entire year now and watched Chris be speculated all over the media because people choose to go in public together and keep it going. And there's been no accountability for that. And it's all been that it's my fault for speaking out. It's my parent, it's everybody else's fault. And I'm not going to let that stick, because from the moment Micah passed, and my heart goes out to the Francis family and the friends of Micah, the moment she passed, the decision to go in public together, that caused the speculation of Chris, and then the continued. And and so I'm not going to take that accountability,
It's like, people want to control the narrative, but they don't want to take accountability for things. It is, the dichotomy is very bizarre to me, and it's very sad, knowing, it is 2025. This happened almost 4 years ago. You have been living with this loss for almost 3 years when Micah died, and it's kind of like reopening the wound. I think it's good that it was reopened, because it made you look at things again. And I think it made the investigators in the coroner take a look at Chris's death again. But, this grief is a journey. You've been on it for a while. And I think Micah's death kind of made it a very unique journey for you. So I think you've done a really commendable job advocating for your brother, for your family, for your parents. I know your mom too. you're a mental health counselor. You do a lot of things. So you put on a new hat, which is, it's not easy.
You know, I want to say one more thing about this, because you just made a light bulb go off inside of my brain. I say there's a lack of empathy, right, for our side and how it's impacted us. Let me tell you guys another aspect. When all this speculation's been going on for a year, I'm a counselor, and people were connecting the dots of who I was in relation to Chris. And so I had clients coming into my building and coming into sessions where they're supposed to be coming to me so I can help them. And they're saying to me like, oh, Tamra, I didn't know you were Chris's sister. Let's talk about it. And I'm like, no, this is your session. Like, and think about how that caught me off guard multiple times. And so the impact on me trying to do my job and have to hear people figuring out who I was.
Right.
And so that's just another aspect that I think is not considered by other people's actions and how they've impacted me. And again, there's no empathy for that.
Right.
So I just wanted to point out all that because I think it's important for people to realize that there are more than just two parties involved. There's other people that are impacted.
Right.
So
for you, for Chris, in your quest to advocate for him and give him a voice, what does justice feel like for you? What does that look like? Like, does it feel good that people are just looking at the circumstances again? Or, I mean, what are your hopes and goals for this?
Yeah, so justice for us, and I'm going to speak for my family because listen, I was with my mom in her interview with the police as well. So it's like, I know everybody's heart, and we always said to the police, we had no expectation on whether or not somebody was going to be charged with a crime or whatever. Because our heart, we know that it's going to be God's will and God's plan. Okay. So for us, justice for us is just the truth. We just want the truth out there. Now, do we have expectations that's ever going to be fully committed to? No. But I will tell you this, there is enough out there now, enough, factual evidence for people to be able to make a consensus of what that truth is. And that's also enough for us to be at peace to go, we know, this, like we know what we need to know. And I'm not sure we're going to ever know 100% about Chris's manner of death and what the true determination should have been. But what I do know is that God will one day hold accountable who he wants, in his time and his plan, and it will all come in the way that he wants it to. And I also know that Chris is at peace and he's healed and that he was a Christian and that I know that I will see him again, as well as my other brother. And so that gives me peace. So that's justice to us is just knowing that we have most of the truth, but not by the people that needed to be honest, but by the people that were brave enough to come forward and tell us the truth. And we are very grateful for those people. I want to thank everybody who has supported me and my page, my Facebook page, Remembering Chris Skinner. And, I started with the intention of letting everybody know who he is. And I feel good that everybody now knows who he is. And now I am going to exit from the Remembering Chris Skinner page or group, and kind of resume my normal life. Does not mean that my advocacy for Chris has stopped. I will still be around on social media. I just have to refocus back onto, my career. And also I'm a doctoral student, as some y'all know, and I'm doing that. And of course, being a mommy and a wife. So it's time for me to take a back seat, but I'm very grateful for everybody and their support and their awareness and everybody that really wanted to, see justice for Chris.
Yeah, I think you've done, like I said, it has been commendable to watch you. It's been an honor to get to know you and kind of help give Chris a voice again in any way that we've been able to. So I really appreciate you trusting us with your story and speaking candidly about Chris and your family.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tamra, and we will keep everybody posted on any updates that we get regarding Chris Skinner, the investigation into his death, any updates we get on Micah Francis Miller investigation, which we have been told is ongoing by federal authorities. Thank you.
Thank you.